Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, a mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in. Welcome into another episode of the podcast, listeners. I am in a marathon podcast episode recording binge today. It's Sunday, it's June 1st. Woo-wee! I have so much to talk about with you guys. And what I want to talk about today is something that I wrote a little blog post about this a couple of months ago after having a really powerful session with some clients. And it's this idea about like uncertainty and what do we really need to know. And I got the idea for this topic when I was talking to a couple that I was working with at the time who the dad works at like a federal civil service job, and it was like right after the administration change, and it's just like uncertainty out the yin yang. And then I actually, for whatever reason, happen to have like multiple clients who are in similar fields, meaning they have government contracts or government jobs. And all of them that whole week, especially anytime I was having a session with any of them, they were talking about like all the rumors flying around in the office place and layoffs happening and watching people leave and then wondering if they were next. And you can imagine the crazy uncertainty that they were dealing with. And it really, like, that really was the topic that we worked on in our session that day, and it was really interesting. I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the things that we discussed. But first, I have to start with my confession. You know that. And I will say that, like, my confession for today is something from the past that is coming back to me recently. So, a lot of you know already that my oldest son, when he was a freshman in high school, he really went through a really hard time, and he had a lot of issues with mental illness, which led to addiction, which led to all the things that addiction leads to. It was a really, really dark time in our family. And it took us a long time to figure out what to do to help him. And ultimately, he ended up needing to go into residential care. He did 3 months in wilderness therapy, and then he did another like year and a couple months in a residential treatment center. And it was absolutely the right decision, and it saved his life. And it really turned this dark time in our family into like an amazing, miraculous, deepening, expansive moment in our family. But that's a story for another day. But the thing that I remember saying over and over again before we decided to send him away, because it was such a, I mean, imagine if you haven't already had to face this, and hopefully you never do, but if you do have to face this, making the decision to send your kid away is, I mean, it is the worst thing you can face, I think, or one of the worst things you can face as a parent. It feels so risky. It feels so extreme. It's scary. I remember saying, like, what if he hates us even more? Or like, what if what if this makes all of his issues worse because he feels like we rejected him, we've abandoned him, and he's struggling with all this mental health stuff, and now we're just going to like kick him to the curb. And what if this just makes everything worse? Or what if it doesn't do anything at all, and we just spent all of this time and money and heartache and agony for nothing, and we're right back where we started when he comes home. What if this, what if that, blah 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 blah. And I can't tell you how many times I said to my therapist, to my sisters, to my friends, to anybody who was recommending it to me, because there was a whole year where it was recommended to me that he should go to wilderness therapy, and I just could not even contemplate that. But as we got closer and closer to thinking like, okay, this looks like this might be the only thing that could possibly work for him. I can't tell you how many times I said to people, if I knew it would work, I would have done it yesterday. Like I would have already done it months ago. It's like if I had this guarantee, if I knew that it was going to work, I would have done it already. And I was really asking for something that's impossible, which is certainty. There's no way to know. And I'm really blessed and lucky that the people we were working with, like we had a really great team of people around us, and they never gaslit me. They never blew smoke up my ass and said, "Oh, but it will work." They were like, "Yeah, you don't know. You don't know if it will work." And even the things that now on the other side I can say, were really unlikely to happen that I brought up, like what if this makes, what makes things worse, or what if it's exactly the same as it was before he went? Well, that's highly unlikely to happen. I know that now, but nobody told me that, because they couldn't, you can't rationalize with someone's fear. And I was sharing my emotions. So I'm glad that nobody, just lied to me and blew smoke up my ass and was like, "Oh no, it's going to be great," because that's not true. It is uncertain. But it was just that feeling of like needing to know. I kept saying over and over again, if I knew that it was the right thing, I would have already done it, a long time ago, right? And this is something that's coming back to me now because I have someone really close to me in my life who's going through, in some ways a very different situation, but in some ways a very similar situation with her kid, where she, things are really not great with her kid right now. And does not know what to do with her kid. And she's trying all of these things and she's getting lots of different suggestions. And she doesn't know if any of them are going to work. And just like it happens with all of us when we're in a scenario like this with our kids, we're trying lots of things that don't seem like the pivot point that we're looking for before we land on the thing that is the right thing that fits for our kid. And the feeling that she is dealing with every day of like, I don't know what to do next. The thing that I'm doing right now, I feel like a fool because I took this step and it didn't work, or it feels like it was unnecessary, or like it's really easy in hindsight to be like, "Oh, I should have just skipped everything else that we did with my son and gone straight to wilderness therapy. That's what finally was the turning point for him." Well, of course, that's not how it went down. I did, 7,000 other things first, and none of them were the right thing for him. And also, it's not really true for me to say, "Oh, I should have done all those other things. I should have skipped all of those other things and just gone straight to wilderness therapy." Like all of the things that we did before he went to wilderness were the things that led to wilderness. They were probably very necessary for both of us to be bought into and 100% committed to wilderness because we'd really exhausted other options, et cetera, et cetera. But it's that feeling of wanting to know. And it's the same feeling that those clients that I was talking to you about when I first wrote that blog post were saying, like, we don't know if we're going to have to move. Like this guy's job is like really hanging in the balance. And in that session, like probably in the first 5 minutes of that session, it was like, we don't know if we're going to have to move. We don't know if I'm going to have to change jobs. We don't know if mom's going to have to go back to work. We don't know how all of this stuff is going to like affect our kids. We don't know if we're going to have to change schools. We don't know, if we can afford to stay here. We don't know, we don't know, we don't know, we don't know. And, I think parents, we are in this situation all of the time, whether or not we're dealing with an administration change or some big, transition at work or something like that. Like how many times have we said, stuff like, "I don't know if this is the right school for my kid," or, "I don't know if I should be getting more strict with my kid or if they need me to be more lenient. I don't know how all of my baggage that I haven't dealt with yet is going to affect my kids. I don't know if I should get divorced or stay married. I don't know if staying married will be worse for my kids or if getting divorced would be worse for my kids. I don't know if what my kid is showing me is just a phase or if it's like who they are forever, if it's a big deal and I need to respond to it, or if it's just like a flash in the pan and it's no biggie. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And finally, in that session, and this is something that I do like with my kids when they get in the I don't know spiral. I've learned how to do it for myself when I get in the I don't know spiral. And it's a twofold thing. The first is, well, what do you know? And in a world that is like totally unpredictable, in a world where uncertainty is the only certainty, at the end of the day, the answer to that question is I know myself. And, obviously in a coaching session, I don't just hand that answer to my clients. It's like, well, what do you know? And this dad was like, well, I know that I love my kids. I know that our family's strong. Um, I know that there are other jobs out there. I know that, I've done a good job at this company. He started really, and you can hear me in my voice even right now, maybe even in my energy, even the pace of my speech. I'm slowing down. I feel more grounded. I feel more in touch with the truth instead of in this like swirling, heady, tornado of uncertainty and fear. You can feel it, even though all the stuff that I'm telling you, I don't know how, these are all examples. Like, I'm not actually feeling this way in my life right now. And even when I was talking about my son, like, I don't feel that way right now about my son or about what to do. I actually am not really in my real life dealing with uncertainty, but even just telling you all this to record for the podcast episode, it brings that energy back of like, oh my God, the world is just so unpredictable, and the next blow could be just waiting for me around the corner. Well, as soon as I switch into like, well, what do I know? It's true, I don't know XYZ. I don't know this whole laundry list of things that I just said I don't know, but what do I know? And with Elijah, it was, well, what do I know? I know that we've tried everything else. I know that the people that we're working with, are upright people, and they've shown themselves to be, very wise and experienced. I know that I love my son. I know that my son loves me. I know that I am like a dog with a bone when it comes to something this important, which means I know I'm not going to give up. I know that, that uh, if all of my what ifs go the way that I don't want them to go, that I will figure that stuff out. Like, I know me. I have my back. So whatever the answer to my what if is, the next answer is, so I will figure that out. What if, wilderness makes it worse? Well, then we will figure that out. We'll hire a new therapist. We'll try a different program. We'll, get input from more experts, et cetera, et cetera. What if, you know? And even that what if game kind of can go to the ultimate, extremes and still be a grounding exercise for me, because at the end of the day, I know I have my back. And that's the thing that I hope you take away from this is, the only thing you need to know is yourself. You don't need to know what the future holds. You just need to know who you are, and to know that whatever the future holds, you will figure it out. I think that when we get into that, like, I don't know, spiral, we're sort of based in this crazy idea that, like, in order for me to be calm and do the right thing, I have to be a fortune teller. Like, I have to know the future in order to be grounded and doing right by my family. In this moment, I have to know what the next moment has in it. And that's not true. Like, calmness does not require a crystal ball. You definitely do not need to predict the future in order to parent well. All you need to know is yourself. And a couple of weeks ago, I talked about this like kind of relationship with a fantasy, when we're like looking into the past and we're having a relationship with the past, or we're looking into the future and we're having a relationship with the potential of this situation. those aren't real. You know, knowing yourself and being in this present moment, relieving yourself of the obligation to like predict the future and know exactly how everything is going to go down. It is so freeing and grounding to recognize that all I need to know is me, and all I need to respond to is this specific moment that I am in right now. You know, when you're grounded in your body, when you're connected with who you are, when you're listening to those like inner cues about, well, what feels right now, like what's the next right step right this minute, the future really is not a problem. That uncertainty isn't a problem, because whatever awaits you, whatever the future holds, the person who's going to be handling it is you. And you are something that you know inside and out. You are a known quantity, you know? And I think that's the piece we forget, is like, okay, the future contains certainty as well, because the certainty it contains is you. So I want you to kind of just give yourself permission to, just imagine, how present and connected you would be with your kid if that's how you were looking at things. Like, I've got my back. The future is nothing. The past is a memory. I'm here right now with you, and I am a known quantity, and that's all I need to know. This is what I help all my clients cultivate through coaching, that ability to let go of the past and the future and be present, the ability to actually know what I'm even talking about when I say, oh, I'm connected to my body and listening to inner cues. What the heck is that, right? But coaching helps you to evolve your mind, to handle surprises and upsets, and, it was even in that one therapy session with this couple, we went from like, I don't know, what are we doing? This is crazy, to, okay, yeah, I'm, the energy was a complete shift on the call. And that parent, that both of them, but especially the dad, who was the one who was like super, his job was on the line and everything, really walked away from that call, with his feet firmly planted on the ground and with some very specific action steps about what he wanted to do. And, some of them were boundaries he was going to set up for himself about engaging with all this speculative gossip at work and stuff like that. And some of it was much more about like, just, having this mantra of like, I know me. Every time his mind said, I don't know XYZ, the answer was, I know myself. And that was a huge grounding thing for him, and now, being able to show up this way, you can allow the future to reveal itself to you naturally over time, instead of you spending all of your time trying to predict the future and respond to this imaginary, once again, like I said a couple weeks ago, fantasy. So if that's interesting to you, like getting that grounding, making this shift, having these sort of like mantras and tools in your back pocket, it all starts with a consultation with me. Set up that free discovery call you hear me talk about every week on the podcast, and tell me about all the unknowns that worry you, and let me help you outline a roadmap to like grounded, responsive approaches to all of those unknowns. The link to set that up is in the show notes. It always is. And I just can't wait to meet with you and help you really achieve that sort of grounded connection. Have a great week, everybody, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye. The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/Kaplan call, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.